Sal the Fadric agus Shodív the climate alarm clock. Tá seachtain na Gaeilge an agus banaclí na féile fáric díobh de goléir. It is Friday the 17th of March, it's St. Patrick's Day, and this is the climate alarm clock. So in this week's headlines, in the US, President Biden has approved a major new oil and gas drilling project in Alaska. Can Ireland meet our emissions targets for 2030? A new Friends of the Earth report finds that the government is failing to deliver on both climate plans and energy poverty. And the government has put the brakes on a proposal to decrease transport emissions. Hello and Fáilte Gujee and Climate Alarm Clock, your weekly Irish climate news podcast. I'm Anna Pringle. Dara is taking a break this week, but we do have a full episode for you. And as always, I'm joined by the lovely Ciara Daly, who is not wearing green today, but maybe should be. How are you, Ciara?
I'm good. How are you, Anna? Lovely bit of Irish. Good girl.
Oh, my Colleen. And we are also joined by a special guest this week, Tom Spencer. So Tom runs irishevs.com, which is a great source of information and knowledge on all things EV and many other topics. He is also the instigator of the Irish Greenwashing Awards. Tom, you're very welcome back to the Climate Alarm Clock. I think it's very timely with all the talk of transport strategy to have you with us this week.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me back again. Yeah, a hell of a lot going on at the moment, and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Right, good stuff. So you're very welcome. So before we start, just a wee reminder that you can help support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com, the Climate Alarm Clock. And we had a nice comment this week from someone who bought us a coffee and said that they really enjoy the roundup and, thanks for all the work we do. So we do appreciate every little bit helps, as they say. So our first story this week that we're going to dive into is the story of the Willow Project. And this project is a major oil and gas drilling project in Alaska. It faced huge opposition in the US from environmental activists and many people. And unfortunately, US President Joe Biden went ahead and approved the project this week. And it was cause of a lot of disappointment in Biden and in the fact that it's going ahead. So what is it? It's located on Alaska's North Slope, which is very remote and in the Arctic Circle. And it's going to invest about $8 billion. It's the largest oil development in the area for decades, and it's going to have 3 drill sites, including almost 200 wells. So think about that and the disruption of that. When it's up and running, it's going to generate 180,000 barrels of oil per day. And what does that mean in terms of CO2? It's like 278 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent over its lifetime. And, I hear those numbers. I don't really know what that means, but just to give you an equivalent, that is like adding 2 million cars to the US roads every year for the duration of the project. So it's it's been described as a carbon bomb. And, it's ConocoPhillips are the company behind the project. And of course, they're saying it'll create local investment, thousands of jobs. It was the right decision for Alaska and for our nation, said the CEO of ConocoPhillips. So it's just a very disappointing development to see this getting approved at this point by President Biden, who has, in the past has said that he wouldn't be doing any more investment or any more oil and gas production in the Arctic Circle in particular. And here he is going back on his word.
Yeah. I read a fact that it was saying, so this story, I actually only heard about it when we were obviously, when you guys sent me through my weekly ping of things to be devastated about. And then I became consumed by it. But I read something that it was, one of the figures was that, in 30 years, it's going to be 2053 and 3 years after. That's 3 years after the date the US are supposed to have achieved a fully fossil-free future. So, it's no surprise really that people are so outraged by this. It's kind of like just completely goes against what the US are supposed to be doing. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer double standards of saying we're going to be fossil-free by 2050, but yet we're going to do this 30-year project that's a carbon bomb and generating more emissions.
Yeah.
It makes no
I
sense.
suppose another figure just to drive home, because I was really consumed by this and I want to bring everyone into the depression with me. There was another figure that said that the extraction project will create one of the largest carbon bombs, which is something that you mentioned on US soil, but that this carbon bomb would potentially produce more than twice as many emissions than all the renewable energy projects on public lands by 2030, like that they would cut combined. So basically, any good work that the US are doing is going to be erased by Biden signing off on this project. So it's not just that they're doing something bad, it's just like they're just completely going against everything we're supposed to be doing right now. And it's kind of like, from the country, one of the countries that are supposed to be saying they're the good guys, it's just a complete lack of show of leadership or integrity or any sense of moral standing.
Yeah.
See, I think you've hit on something really interesting as well there, Kira, which is we talk about it necessarily in terms of like the amount of carbon that's emitted or the consequences that we're going to see of this. And one of the hidden consequences is the mental health aspect of it. Like we're seeing a rise in climate anxiety or eco-anxiety, whatever you want to see it, the more that governments sort of renege on their promises, the more that we sort of see a rise of greenwashing, the more that we see emissions continue to rise. Like this really affects all of us, and we sort of, we make a good joke of it because we have to. Sometimes you have to laugh in the face of these things, but these kind of projects are really going to affect not only our physical health but our mental health for the next decade, century, and that's not really being discussed at the moment. And I think it's something that kind of should come to the fore a bit more.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom. And in particular, I think it's worse when you have hope. Like when no, but I mean, it's worse. It's worse when your hopes are dashed than just not to expect anything. If that makes sense, So like when Biden was elected, he was elected on the back of votes by young people, and as the climate president. And for him to do that, it just feels like, I imagine for the people who voted for him, feels like such a betrayal. So I think that makes it even worse when your hopes are dashed. And a lot of the opposition to this, I mean, there was massive opposition in the US. There was something like 3 million signatures on a petition. A lot of it was from TikTok, from young people. And for them to see that kind of betrayal, as you say, Tom, it has to have an effect on your mental state, I think, as well as everything else.
What about, so like obviously the emissions, that's a very big reason for people to be really angry about it. But what are some of, I suppose, the on the ground kind of effects? Like, how is it going to affect the area where the actual projects are going to take place? Or are there effects? Do they need to worry?
Well, I mean, it's the Arctic Circle. It's a very, very at-risk landscape, and one of the reasons not to drill there is because of that. And so and also, as we know, the Arctic is already affected more than any other part of the world by global warming. So one of the really scary things about this, so you've got like some of the native villages are already facing rates of chronic illnesses. They're already seeing the pollution and so on. But one of the scary things about this is, and Elizabeth Colbert in the New Yorker pointed this out, the permafrost underneath where this is going on is starting to melt. So in order for the drilling to be on a secure foundation, they have to chill the permafrost. And think about that. Like, I know it's mad stuff. And her quote on it, which I thought was a brilliant quote, is that she says, a massive oil project that requires chilling the permafrost is unfortunately the perfect metaphor for our time. So you're taking oil out that's melting the permafrost, and so the whole area is unstable and environmentally very sensitive as well.
Yeah. I saw something from, the native communities were saying like that this was really exactly like, it's just an example of what you said, I suppose. It's really just going to speed up the climate breakdown, and then it has the, knock-on effect of it's going to undermine our food security. So it's not just like this is a bad thing to do. It's like it's really going to have like global effects. But,
I mean, Rebecca Solnit, who's a leading writer on this subject, she says it's an act of terrorism against the climate.
Yeah.
And that's how we need to think. But even Al Gore came out and called it recklessly irresponsible and a recipe for climate chaos. So, I mean, that's the depth of feeling against it that Biden just ignored and signed it in. unfortunately.
Well, just one of the things I thought was kind of interesting is, and we've already touched on it slightly, it was the number one trending topic on TikTok for a while because young people were actively engaged in trying to raise awareness of the consequence of this project. But I think what's really interesting is that set against the way that the media often reported it is it's going ahead, climate activists alarmed.
Yeah.
And there's still this disconnect that only climate activists are going to be affected by the climate crisis. This idea that, you or I or anyone on this listening to this podcast we're really going to be harmed by this, but everyone else is going to be grand. And I think there's often still this disconnect that even climate activists are the most renowned scientists in the world, these people that we sort of should be revering, that have spent their life, going to the very best colleges, getting the best education, and now are being widely ignored for saying, like, this is a really big problem. Which I think, the work of Scientist Rebellion is so important in this context, to start saying, actually, we have to treat this as a proper emergency, as a crisis. But I thought that was a really telling aspect, that the media still sort of pigeonholes it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that framing means that anyone, it's annoying climate activists. So, it makes it sound like it's not that big a deal, because these fringe people are being annoyed by it. So, yeah, it's very disappointing to see that as well.
How was it that Biden justified his support? Like, for a guy who said he wasn't going to approve any more of these projects, how did he kind of say, okay, how did he backpedal?
I think he did say some things like that. There were already leases. ConocoPhillips already had leases, and so it would have been hard to get out of it. So I don't think he backpedaled very effectively.
The compromise. But wasn't it supposed to be 5 sites? So I think he was saying that.
So he reduced it to 3 sites or something, and then also the day before, the same day, he blocked other drilling in the Arctic. You're kind of like, okay, why bother? As Rebecca Solnit said, it's like, he seems to think we do some good things and then some bad things that'll even out. She said, it's like we're going to kill your mother, but we're sending guards to protect your grandmother. But it doesn't, and her point is, it doesn't make your mother less dead if you do that, So
seems like a kind of when I read that, I was like, that's such a crass comparison, but that's actually exactly what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to get over that. There was a thing when I was reading about it, just, about what I thought was interesting, and it kind of ties in with what you were saying, Tom, is there is this kind of sense of like, oh, it's just the climate activists that are upset about this. It's not the real people that we need to care about. And like, I'm absolutely no expert in politics, but I think it was maybe the Guardian article was talking about how essentially what Biden's doing is just taking a bet that by him becoming more moderate, he's going to be kind of improving his chances. There's an upcoming election in the next 18 months, so he's going to be improving his chances by essentially allowing this project to go through. But he's kind of playing both sides in that he's going to presumably play the line that he got that, there was a compromise, and he reduced the impact of the project by bringing it from 5 projects down to 3. But then for the other side, who are, really support, there obviously is a huge kind of support for the fossil fuel industry in the US. He can also play into them in that he's pushed it through and he's kind of enforcing his reputation as a moderate. I actually was having this conversation the other day with my father, who works in the homeless services, and I was talking about how even here in the Irish government, I think that you can see the similar things happening around the housing. And I like to think that politicians are really out of touch and really underestimating how pissed off, angry, despaired people are at the things that are going on. And I like to think that, Biden is really underestimating that TikTok generation, that it's very easy to dismiss them, but I really do hope that outrage turns into action, and that they do, vote is kind of the easiest, the main way that they can kind of call for change. So I really hope that his bet does not pay off, and that people are kind of going to put their money where their TikTok videos are. Go on, Anna.
I think you're right. The risk, though, is, Biden got in because there was a massive youth vote. Mm-hmm. The risk is it'll put them off voting, and because there's no alternative to vote for in the US, so it's a high risk strategy. And I hope you're right. I hope they do come back stronger and hold him accountable. But then, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
in the US
And it's
anyway.
really disgusting that people play politics with these.
Absolutely.
Kind of
But now
issues.
that kind of might be a good segue actually into our second story. We will, by the way, there is still, just to finish off on the Willow Project, there is still a lot of opposition to it. There is still a chance that it might get caught up in the courts, might not go ahead. And we will, there is a petition later that we'll put a link to in the show notes as well. So our second story, we're looking at Ireland. And so, as we said, in the US, there's a lot of politics going on. We've got very strong climate targets here in Ireland, but in recent weeks we have been seeing serious questions being raised about, one, whether we will actually hit the targets, and two, how committed the government really is to taking serious action to hit the targets. So just as an example, the offshore wind industry in the last week or two has talked about a U-turn in government policy that they say puts offshore wind targets at risk. They're saying that more than 80% of the projects currently in the pipeline might now be frustrated because of what they're calling a policy U-turn. So that's one example. Another example we saw this week was a Friends of the Earth report that found that climate poverty is increasing. And what that means is that the percentage of people who can't afford to pay their electricity bills and their heating bills is going up. And at the same time, climate action targets on retrofitting and housing aren't being achieved. So, the government's new plans are failing on both levels here. And then there was our transport strategy, which kind of kicked off last week. And I might just hand it over to you, Tom, to give us the background on that and what your perspective is and what's going on there.
Yeah, wow, that's a hell of a hospital pass, I think. So I think the first thing to say is it's a plan to make a plan that eventually we will have a plan that might become a strategy, that might become a policy.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Yeah. And the leprechaun at the end of the rainbow.
Paddy would have gotten rid of the snakes. Would it have taken him much longer if he had to go through all this bureaucracy?
We would have had a plan for a strategy to get rid of the snakes.
By 2050, we might be snake neutral, possibly, maybe.
But we'd be bringing in some big snakes before that, though.
Yeah.
Exactly, and we'll have some sort of new technology that doesn't exist and isn't viable to suck some of the snakes out of the air and convert them into trees. I don't know.
Okay, well, I think we've exhausted the snake metaphor. Carry on, Tom.
So essentially, the plan. What I find quite interesting is the way it's been sold. So on the face of it, I think the plan suggests that we should be using more active travel and more public transport, which I don't think anyone would argue against. I think it is undeniable in the face of the climate crisis, this is the most sustainable way for anyone to travel. What's really interesting is it was sold as a very heavy anti-car policy. So it was the idea of, I think, a 400% increase in parking rates, things like low emission zones in Dublin and Cork and other cities, and ultimately trying to get more people out of their cars. And that should be a good thing. But the way it was sold was this idea of, I don't know, demonizing cars and saying you can't have the thing you want. I think what we keep seeing is the government is sort of leading with the stick with the promise of a carrot further down the line. We will make public transport more available or cheaper, but only if you get out of your cars. And that's such a difficult thing when we have the second highest car dependence in Europe.
Yeah.
And also at a time when 76% of the new cars sold in Ireland last year were entirely reliant on fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. Now, while I write about electric cars a lot, there is absolutely no denying that active travel and public transport is the only way forward here, really. It's only because we have such a high car dependency and such a high level of particularly diesels being sold that I think there is some viability in EVs, but that doesn't address issues like the amount of urban space that's dedicated to parking. It doesn't address issues like congestion, and it also doesn't address issues like energy poverty or climate poverty, as Friends of the Earth has put it. And I think there was a really interesting aspect to this as well. That was the very next day, Eamon Ryan came out and said that he is against the idea of free public transport because it would increase the level of unnecessary trips.
Oh, Eamon.
What's a necessary trip? Like just going to work?
It seems so against the whole idea of if public transport works on volume, the more people are using it, the cheaper it is, and the more carbon efficient it is. It seems wholly stupid to say, you have to validate this trip before you go on it.
Well, I mean, apparently there's valid research to say that if you have a limited amount of money to invest in public transport, you're better off investing it in infrastructure and service rather than investing in making it free. Okay, so I get that. If you've 500 million, put more buses on before you make them free. Fair enough. But it is just tone deaf the way he said it, and he just does this so often where he just sets himself up for ridicule and criticism in the way he says things. So to come out and say you don't want people making unnecessary journeys, it's like, who are you to even judge that? It just seems so out of touch.
He just misstepped, because I know that I have often said things on this podcast where I'm like, that is not what I meant.
But you're not the minister for transport.
Yeah, but let's give him a break if a break is deserved. Could there be a possibility that he said something and he was like, oh no, and now it's gone crazy? I don't know. I'm just asking your guys' opinion.
Yes, but Eamon Ryan does this regularly, and he knows he's got a gazillion advisors. He knows that everything he says gets picked up and distorted.
Yeah.
So
he needs to be on it.
He needs to be super, super careful. So, people ran with that then and used it to criticize him and criticize the Greens, as opposed to looking at the merits of whatever it was he was proposing.
But then also, people also need to cop on because they're totally missing the point. The whole crux of what we're talking about is the fact that our emissions need to be reduced.
Yes.
And Eamon Ryan is the person responsible for bringing that plan together. The man didn't even bring the plan. He was just bringing a plan to create the plan. And before the plan even got approved, people started losing their minds because he wanted to do his job, essentially, is what happened.
I mean, but what happened was he was bringing a memo to Cabinet that had some proposals in it for discussion, not proposals for implementation. And it's going to be a year-long process to develop the strategy. And the Cabinet refused to even consider the memo.
So that is actually what the story should be. That's what the big problem here is, not
absolutely
what he said.
And as
there's a definite problem with the PR of it, that they are not selling. They should consider how they're selling this to the public, because there is a hearts and minds side to this where you need to show people, look, if we can give you the provision, particularly in rural areas, because I have a quote here from Carol Nolan, an independent TD, who said, these are just the latest in a long litany of deluded and detached policy incentives that bear no relation to rural Ireland or the wishes of the people. Now, I'm in rural County Clare. Mm-hmm. We don't have much provision for public transport. We do have some. It could be a lot better. But one that I thought was really interesting was Hannah Daly, who's a researcher down in Cork, did a fantastic blog where she talked about trying to take her kids to school and trying to get to UCC to do work. And she compared driving in her, I think, Nissan Leaf, and the relative convenience of that, and the amount of time it would take, the number of bus changes and the cost as well that it would take for her to do the same trip. And I think that's the problem that we're seeing, is that disconnect constantly between, we need to sell this as a positive, we need to be real about where we are, and as we've seen with some other green issues this week, their PR isn't excellent. They could work on that. But I think it also helps cover up the fact that we're not acting. Yep. These are plans to make plans, but actually we are so far down the line now that we are missing every emissions target. We shouldn't be making plans anymore. This should be about actual real action. And I know we have to sort of put in place just to make that happen and make it enforceable, but we're so far behind, so incredibly far behind. And actually one thing that I found that came out yesterday that was really interesting was the research that was talking about free public transport and how that doesn't necessarily translate to an increased use, was in Manchester. They lowered the bus fares. Now, obviously, this is a singular city and it is an urban environment, but they lowered the bus fares. So it was £2 for an adult single ticket and £5 for a daily ticket. That's a 17% real world reduction in the cost. And that led to a 10% increase in use. So that's 1.5 million extra journeys during a cost of living crisis. That is a huge huge difference for the majority of people who are really struggling. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was they did a survey of people who had used the transport after the cuts. And 60% of respondents said that it helped them have new travel opportunities, visiting more places more often. And I think that's so telling, the idea of we should be enjoying life. It's okay to enjoy life. It's okay to have unnecessary journeys. And I think we often talk about it from an able-bodied perspective.
Yeah.
If we're talking about people who are struggling financially or people who might struggle from an accessibility perspective, offering them the opportunity to go somewhere they wouldn't normally go is a fantastic thing that we should be pushing for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at the senior free travel for pensioners. You know, I know people who just, you know, they go to Limerick for the day on the train because they can. Yeah, that's an unnecessary journey, but as you say, it opens up their world, you know, and gives them opportunity to do things that they couldn't
If we
afford
can't
to do.
enjoy ourselves, what are we working for?
I know.
Do you know what's so sad and so telling? Like last night, the points that you guys are making, I was trying to say it, but I couldn't. And I had to Google, because I remember I used to always go on about United Ireland, the podcast with Una Mullally and Andrea Horan. And I remember Andrea Horan giving this line. I had to Google how she described it because I couldn't even find the words, because I'm so brainwashed by the idea that I have to work, you know, I have to earn all this money and I have to put in all this time before I even bother to think about sitting down and maybe just chilling out. And the way that she described it was contrary to all the neoliberal messaging we're hit with on an ongoing basis. Life is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to feel good. Like, why did I have to Google that to be able to even have that thought? But like, honestly, that's so telling of like the messaging that we're being bombarded with all the time. Don't take an unnecessary trip. Like, just fuck off. Keep that in, Rob. Don't edit out my swearing.
I think there's something really telling in that as well, which is if you watch any car advert. Now, I write about cars, but I'm also possibly one of the most anti-car people you might meet at the moment. Every advert is selling you freedom. Get in this massive, oversized vehicle that only one person's going to be in, that can mow down a child with ease, but have your freedom to do so. And what we're saying in Ireland
and every ad, is an empty road as well. An empty road through pristine forests.
Exactly,
you know,
but don't you dare take a bus.
If car ads had, like, you know, the Drumcondra Road at 9:00 on, you know, a Tuesday morning, it would not sell any cars.
Yeah.
Exactly. We always see these amazing videos of bus lanes that work with buses flying past congestion. We know that that's the way forward, but if we sell public transport in Ireland as, well, don't you dare take an unnecessary journey, then this myth that advertising sort of perpetuates of this is freedom. You can listen to your own music, you can have your own space, and you can help destroy the planet. You know, it's real freedom. And we have to start selling public transport as a viable and attractive option. Go and see the beauty that Ireland has to offer in the most sustainable way and enjoy it, and maybe socialise, maybe have some crack on the bus with other people.
What even Ryan is missing is that if people can actually get out into the countryside and get out to nature and get out to places that are quiet and peaceful, they're going to connect with nature. And then they're actually going to give a shit about what he wants them to care about. And not just Eamon Ryan, all the ministers, but
not if they're sitting in their cars. But I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, to your point, Tom, about PR, is there are actually some really good stories from around the country as well about public transport. Like where I'm from in Donegal, they've got a local link service now that is
passes through the door where I am today. 4 days, 4 times a day. My mother tells me every time it goes past.
But it's vastly improved in the last few years. And like I know a neighbour of ours who's an elderly lady. The bus, and it's in the very rural area. The bus comes and picks her up almost at her door and takes her into Donegal town once a week. That is her social outlet.
The bus here brings you to the beach. Don't tell Eamon Ryan. Nobody needs to go to the beach. He's going to cut that off.
That is definitely an unnecessary journey. You could be doing that on foot, Ciara. Come on.
And do you know what the ironic thing is? It's the beach that's going to be gone in 50 years. Wow, everything's so intertwined.
I know. True. But we need to be getting those positive stories out. And it drives me nuts, the rural Ireland discourse about, you know, it's the death of rural Ireland. They have to have cars. EVs won't work in rural Ireland. Actually, they would work far better in rural Ireland than in the cities, because people have room for chargers typically. It's just so annoying.
We're also seeing, I mean, EVs often end up being reduced to electric cars, but we're seeing electric bus fleets that are serving rural areas. Like, that's the way forward.
Absolutely.
Ultra low emission, zero emissions, let's be honest, isn't true unless you're running everything directly from renewable power, which hopefully we will in the future. But public transport that is as low emissions as possible, run by EVs that aren't going to perpetuate things like, respiratory issues. That's the way forward. It's a great thing, and we are doing it. You're right. We should celebrate where we do have the wins, because it is easy to sort of get bogged down in the mire, I think, sometimes.
So, guys, to come back to the strategy itself, or the memo for the strategy, it's not happening, essentially, or it's what's happened there. There was obviously a bit of a parallel. Well, I saw it anyway. I don't know if you guys are quite as clever as I did, but there's quite a bit of a parallel here to what's going on in the US. Because what's happening, what I think it was, I don't know which publication said it, but they were saying that local council seats are up for grabs next year. So it's really likely that this memo has been put on pause right now, because they don't want opposition being placed on, they don't want a focus being placed on these plans.
Yeah.
So likelihood is that these policies are going to wait until the second half of the government's term, and that means there's going to be less chance that any of the necessary actions or decisions around car use are going to be dealt with, or even going to be implemented by the current cabinet. So again, it's just another idea of putting their own kind of political progression ahead of the actual important issues that we are electing them to bloody deal with. So that's a nice one to kind of celebrate St. Patrick's Day with. Snakes everywhere in the US and in Ireland.
Yes, well, I think stay tuned. It'll have to happen. We have a 50% reduction target in emissions for transport that the government has signed up for themselves. So hopefully we will start to see some things. But the other thing that struck me about that story as well is that it means we all have to change. So there will be things like, maybe there'll be less parking on my street in Dublin, and I have to be okay with that. Or maybe I will have a congestion charge to go into the city centre, and you know what? I'll leave the car at home. I'll be okay with that. And it's easy for me to say that. It's not easy for everyone, but we all will have to make some changes.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish with a nice positive, which was, and maybe we could emulate this. In Belgium this week, they announced that all Belgians are entitled to a bicycle allowance for their commute to work.
Wouldn't work in rural Ireland, Donna. Come on.
Yeah, well, it would work in Dublin. Okay, I think lots more to come on that transport story. So we'll move on now, I think, to our news roundup. And I was struck this week by a couple of stories from off our southwest coast. This is one that I know will fill us with joy. There's a super trawler currently fishing off the Cork coast that is called the Death Star of the Oceans. I just see the Death Star when I hear that. And this is this giant trawler that is hoovering up everything in front of it, and very, very destructive environmentally. And then also on our southwest coast, more interestingly, Skellig Micheal has been chosen as a site for a climate change study. So it's one of some UNESCO sites, heritage sites around the world that has been chosen to look at the effects of climate change. So that should be interesting to see what comes out of that, and hopefully it's a positive way of protecting sites like Skellig Micheal.
You know what's funny about that story? I saw it on RTE. It was almost like, oh my God, we're great. And I was like, no.
Yeah, I know.
They're checking out. Our world is eroding, weirdos.
I know. I suppose we're great because it's important enough of a site to be chosen for it.
Go
It's like, yeah.
What else?
Do I have to do all these? Anybody else want to do one?
Well, I've got one. Anna, you and I are always giving poor old Bernie Looney a hard time. But actually, it turns out he's a good guy, because a Saudi Arabian company, Saudi Aramco, have reported a record $161 billion profit for 2022. So that's more than the results reported by Shell. You have to laugh, because if you don't, you'll cry. BP, Exxon and Chevron combined. So, formal apology, Anna.
Yes.
We're sorry, fossil fuel industry. You're actually not that bad.
We take it all back, Shell and BP. You're in the halfpenny place compared to Saudi Aramco, which is, by the way, owned by the Saudi government, which is, by the way, one of the most repressive governments in the world. But, we won't go there.
And we're all looking forward to the next COP where we have a head oil person presiding as president over the event. Isn't that going to be a wonderfully progressive event?
And he was actually just in Houston this week. That same guy from the Emirates was in Houston this week talking to the oil industry and telling them that they need to play a positive role in climate change. So I thought, yay, go, keep talking to yourselves, guys, and tell yourselves how great you are at helping with climate change. Yeah. But then we have another story, which is if the CO2 won't kill us, there's always phosphorus waiting for us. So, as if we don't have enough Armageddon stories, scientists are now warning of phosphageddon.
Yeah.
Which is, again, part of fertilizers are just dumping phosphorus all over, wrecking waterways, etc. So
that's a really interesting one, actually. So I think we definitely need to kind of keep an eye on that and go into it in one of the next episodes.
Okay, we'll do that, Ciara. Tom, you had noticed something from French TV that was a bit more, was interesting as well?
Yeah, happy news. I bring happy news. So there are two state channels in France, state TV channels, France 2 and France 3. They are now changing their weather forecasts to be known as weather and climate bulletins. So they are going to use it as an opportunity not only to talk about the weather, but also to talk about why it's happening. Right. So they are specifically bringing the climate into it, which I think is an amazing thing to do. It's such a brilliant opportunity on a daily basis to educate people about what's going on, the differences and the connections between weather and climate. And actually, they're also taking questions from people on social media or people that view the station to try and address some of the misconceptions or some of the knowledge gaps that people have. Brilliant, easy idea that people can engage with really easily. And I think would be something that we could definitely see here. It would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's one other thing that got buried in the story as well, which I think is really interesting, which is that those two TV stations have also said they are not going to use planes for reporting. They're encouraging all journalists to use trains. They've said with the exception of emergencies, they will not use planes in mainland France, which brilliant. Excellent. Another actually interesting thing that is not greenwashing, an actual action, which is brilliant. So well done to France 2 and France 3 for giving us some actual positive news.
That's great. And actually there was research done in Australia. They did something similar where they used weather forecasters as climate change communicators, and because they're already great communicators, people listen to them already, and they found it had a massive impact on people's understanding of what was going on with the climate. So it's great to see that in France as well. Okay, so actions for this week. Ciara, you found a great resource. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, Anna. So I was scrolling through Instagram the other day and I came across a woman called Roisin Fitzgerald who had this amazing resource, which was basically just a list of all of these organisations, all of these influencers, resources, media, news outlets, just general kind of climate information that she's got them all compiled together that you can go through, pick out things that you find interesting and learn about. And then when I was scrolling, I saw the climate alarm clock and I was like, ah! So that was pretty exciting as well.
Actually, we were top of her podcast list, which was nice to see.
Yeah, it's really nice. So thank you, Roisin Fitzgerald, for this fabulous document, and thank you for including us.
But it's a great way of figuring out how to get involved in things. So check it out. We'll put it in the show notes, the links to it.
Yeah.
Tom, any actions from your side?
Yeah, actually, there's a fantastic change.org petition. Say no to the Willow Project. It'll be in the show notes, but a fantastic petition. It's got 3.8 million signatures already, and this is a direct way that people can get involved in trying to stop the horrific project that we were talking about at the top of the podcast. So go check that out.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thanks, Tom. And it's spring equinox coming up. So, enjoy the longer evenings, enjoy the bit of spring that we are seeing now, and make sure you get out into fresh air in the next week.
Yes. Take those unnecessary journeys, you rebels.
Okay, that's it for this week. It was lovely chatting to you, Ciara. Lovely having you on again, Tom.
Yeah, nice having you, Tom.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So if you enjoyed listening, please share the podcast with a friend. And if you haven't already, take a moment to rate and review it, as that helps us to reach more listeners. Who knows what countries they might be in this week. And a reminder, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Climate Alarm Clock, and on Twitter and Mastodon at The Climate Alarm. And remember, we do have a donation page on buymeacoffee.com/The Climate Alarm. If you would like to throw a few bob our way to keep us ticking over, and wherever in the world you are, we would appreciate that. Next week, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, releases the last report in the 6th assessment, and we will be focusing on that next week. I know that fills you with joy, Ciara, to think about that.
My favourite topic.
And that is it for now. So, slán go fáil agus bannachtí lála fáric live go léir.
Garv Mila Mahaga.
Slán! If we can't enjoy ourselves, what are we working for?